Good evening. What we're going to discuss tonight is pre-death planning, just how to start a conversation and a few things to consider in terms of creating your own wishes. We all have things that we want to do that'll make the process go a little smoother in the life situations. Right now, when we're talking about death or preparing for death, what you are really trying to do is celebrate a life. When we have life celebrations, we have to go and we have to remember that it takes the burden off a lot of decisions. Because when it comes to the time of death, there's a lot of decisions that are done quick. There's a lot of decisions where you don't have the paperwork, you don't know where the finances are, you don't know where the person's communities are. You're just at a loss because it's a rush time and you have a time frame and you're already emotional because the one that you love is gone. So it's good to have talks ahead of time. And that's what this is about, is preparing for death. It's having that conversation prior to it so everybody can be prepared. What are some of the things that people consider when it comes to time of death? It's things like when you say, well, I want a funeral arrangement. Well, how do you want it designed? How does it fit your life? Some people will say, I want same day funeral, which just basically means a viewing, a funeral, a cemetery the same day. You could do 2 days. You can design it however you want to design it to reflect your life. But in terms of all of that, you have to consider some options. People who will want to have it all on the same day, it may be too much for them to come and revisit or pick up where they left off. And like me, I like being private. So I don't want anybody at the cemetery but my intimate crew. Not that I don't love you. It's just I want to be able to just keep it extremely intimate. So that would be something I would want for my children if I die. I discuss those things with them. Also, if you want your casket open, if you want your casket closed, how you would want basic things. Graveside service. I went to the sweetest graveside service this weekend. She was 98 years old and she outlived everybody. She had no friends, she had no relatives, and she was faithful to her church until she got ill. And the church came with 3 deacons and a few friends, her caretakers came through the years. It was so sweet because they all had an opportunity to talk about who she was and her character and just share. And that's really what funerals do. It brings people together so they can share and talk about the life. So when you go and you say that you're going to plan your funeral, you have to figure out what you want. How do you want your service to go? Who would you like to do your service? Then you have different mechanism. You can have burial, and everybody knows what burial is at the cemetery. You can be entombed. You go into a mausoleum. You can be cremated. You go into a tort, or you can donate your remains. But these are things that you should discuss with your family or discuss prior to death. When it comes to planning, understand burial space increase every single year. And due to COVID, our industry in Passaic County got flooded, meaning there are no more non-title graves. There are no more next in line graves. The majority of graves are more expensive because so many people died and it went beyond cemeteries preparing for them. So because of that, the price of graves continue to go up. Why do they go up? Because you're purchasing the land. With entombment, if you can get a pre-construction price, it's always a lot cheaper and you can plan for it. Cremation is on the rise. Cremation is on the rise again, but cremation is because there's not a lot of land. And when you say crematory, things have changed through the years. Where even 10 years ago, if you went to the crematory, you can smell burning. But now the retort is so high, so intense that they call it combustion. You go and you hear the light go, and that's basically all you'll hear. You won't smell anything. And it's to me, it's more humane. And we could break donation down into a few areas. People donate their whole body if they want to go to science and be a cadaver, or you can donate your long bones, you can donate your eyes, but those things that have to be established prior to death. You need to plan ahead. This is where we get into problems at a funeral behind not planning. When you come and you come to bury your loved one, we're going to ask a lot of questions. And it's hard if you don't know the answers to a lot of the questions because then you have to leave and do homework. And this is just basic statistics for the death certificate. We have to ask every family their full name of the deceased, their social security number. Most people come unprepared, the date of birth, the place of birth. It's funny. A lot of people don't know where their loved one was born. Oh, they were born down south. What city? Then they have to go and do research on that. They get on the phone, they call their aunts in the middle of a arrangement conference. Are they in the armed forces? Yes, they are. Did you bring a DD 214? No, I don't know where it's at. Without a DD 214 now, which is from the military, you no longer can get a flag. You cannot register for burial. We can't do anything to obtain it right now. Maybe after COVID's over, we'll be able to assist you at death, but we can't do it anymore. Other questions, they're all listed that they'll ask. Spouse's name. For the women, what's the maiden name? And it seems like we know the answers, but if you really think about it, your grandmother died and your children are burying. What's her maiden name? All I knew it was as Nana. I knew she was a Rudolph, but I never knew mine, I don't know. They never knew she was a Jordan. Your mother's maiden name. And the one that really gets people, your domestic status. In the state of New Jersey, there is no such thing as common law. You could be married for 40 years, 60 years, and all you are is a companion. You have absolutely no rights in the state of New Jersey when it comes to death. People start out, that's my husband, I'm the wife, until we get down to further questions to find out you were a wifey and you were there for 40 years. At that point, we have to change the arrangement conference. And the reason why nowadays this is so important, because everything's done electronically. For death certificates, when you leave the arrangement room, we normally start EDRS, which is the electronic death certificate system. And once we put that information in and process that death certificate, it's not like the old days. If you make a correction, they'll give you a new death certificate. What they'll do is add an addendum, and forever your death certificate will just have extra papers that are attached to it. They never go back and correct the first one. They never reissue the first one. They'll reissue you a adjusted one, but it'll be paper stapled together. So it's very important to have all the information when you come. It's good for families to sit together and really find out who your father was, your father's name, his mother's name before she was married, to get that information in a folder that the family would at least know. Right of kinship. Right of kinship is who has the right to control the arrangements in categories. The first one is legal spouse or registered domestic partner, civil union partner, or what we call a funeral agent. They have the primary right. If there's no spouse, no registered domestic partner, no funeral agent, it goes to the next degree of kinship. Then it goes to the majority of surviving children over the age of 18. That is children and stepchildren. If somebody lists that I am the stepchild, then once that is listed, that stepchild has the same rights as a regular child. If you have a big family, it's very hard to get everybody on the same page at the time of death, because people come with their own experience based on their relationship that they had with their loved one. So if you never discuss what you really want, then what you're doing at your time of death, you're leaving it on them to make a decision. And again, if you have a lot of children and your children don't agree when you were alive, they probably won't agree when you're dead. But they all have equal rights. Funeral homes are not allowed to say, oh, because you came here and it was your decision, that's what we're going to do. It's the majority. We're not allowed to get involved. If it comes to a point that we can't, no resolve can come, we have to step back. The court has to make a decision. But that body will have to sit until after the majority is in agreement. Okay? It's surviving parents. If the person who died, the decedent, is not married, doesn't have any children, not a parent, it goes to the parents, the surviving parents. It doesn't make a difference if he was never in his life and my son died in a car accident, and all of a sudden the father comes and he says, I don't agree. Families will argue saying, where were you? Doesn't make a difference. They have equal rights and they have to agree. So it is the surviving parents. Then it goes, the next one is if there's no spouse, no children, no parents. Then it goes to other relatives according to the degree of relationship. If it goes to cousin, it's the majority of all the cousins because everybody has equal rights and they're not going to be challenged at the funeral home. It's just you have to know what your rights are, then you know you have a say. And if there's no unknown or living relative, then we have to put something in the paper or online to give family members enough time to know this. Yes, this one did die. And yes, I am a cousin to speak up for them. But the only thing that others won't be able to do is cremation because cremation is final. So we get to when you don't know or you don't have the right of kinship or you want to make it let somebody else. That's very good right now in New Jersey. It's called a funeral agent. And you can assign a person or two people to handle your final dispositions and arrange your rights. It has nothing to do with finances. It's just that I trust them to carry out what my wishes will be. Even if you sat down with your family, even if your family's in agreement, even if your family will say, well, yes, we know what she wants, but at the time of death, it would be too difficult for your children or your family to come together and go through this. So you say, no, I would like to assign somebody that I know will carry out our wishes and carry them out because once you're dead, anything you put down, you have no rights. You have no rights, you have no decision. Once you're dead, even down to if you own a grave, you have no rights. That's your property, but somebody else has to go and authorize it because you have no say once you are dead. Okay? And so the right of kinship concerns you can appoint someone to control it. You also can put it in your will. You can say, I would like this person to control it, and it can be written up in your will. Or right now is new. The state of New Jersey, we have forms. It's just two signatures. The person who's notarizing and the person who the arrangements are for. You have it notarized, they sign it, and doesn't have to go into a will. It doesn't have to be approved by the courts. All you have to do is hold on to your copy. It seems like it was a lot of information, but I want to just take a stop right now and entertain any questions.
Dr. Sharice, what is your question?
I have two questions. One, because I have two children, right? Based on the information that you gave, if I want someone else to be the executive of my state, I need to document that and allow them to carry out what I'm asking. Well, is that possible? I guess that's one of my questions.
Yes, that's called a funeral agent, and you do not have to have a will. You can fill out a form. At the end of this, I will make sure that LITE has forms because I know they have notaries. If LITE has forms, then it's that simple. You can do it at LITE.
Should I designate an executive of my estate because there is money involved along with what is that I'm asking to do?
Yes, and you can talk to Sister Arnett.
Yes, that was the session that we did last month. So once we put it up online, you'll be able to review it and get some information, okay?
Okay, so my next question is because I belong to a sorority, where do I put that information regarding the process of me being in a sorority, those ritualistic ceremonies that I am due upon my passing?
We take all of that information down when we sit with a funeral conference, or you can do a pre-need conference where you would sit down and you would provide all of that information in terms of scheduling it. If it's at a church, the church has to decide if they allow it. But we do take that all into consideration. We'll ask for it. We work with all organizations. Most funeral homes do, because we do it a lot.
Okay.
But that's the information you need to have. You need to have it written down somewhere for your children or your funeral agent, or you can do pre-need arrangements where you would have it all in your arrangement folder. Any other questions?
Nope, that was it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Read the question.
Mhm.
It says, why do they need to know the last employer? This is from Sister Melanie.
Yes, that's a requirement from vital statistics. Not only do they need to know the last employer, they need to know what your occupation was and what you did while you were there. And the majority of people say, I retire. They've been retired longer than what I've been alive. Still have to search it out and put the information down. I believe that's government tracking, but we're required to provide it. Okay, since Dr. Sharice brought up that she would like to have all of her information, that really gets lost when people wait to the last minute to write down their obit information. I just think it's good practice to start writing it every year. This way, that families don't have to figure out what's important to you. You can you don't have to write it in the form of a program, but at least have all the information that you want to be, how you want to be remembered, put down. Like most people wouldn't know, my favorite song at death is the Old Rugged Cross. Oh, I love it. And I'll be like, oh, I need that song. If I wait for, well, Timmy's gonna die before me. If I wait for my kids to go and write it up, I know the Old Rugged Cross is not gonna make it on my program. But so it's just things like that that I have to make sure, oh, I want that song. Oh, I would like for this person to speak. I don't want any live flowers. It's just the things that I want because a funeral is supposed to reflect you. Okay. Now, I was shocked we didn't have any questions about the right of kinship. The right of kinship, people don't know their place. And because things change, I'm really, stressing this one. When things change, they'll come in and they think they have a right. And it's hard to tell them, no, you really don't have a say. But they really don't. They'll have a lot, and then they'll think it's tied to their money. You can be the beneficiary of an insurance policy. You can have all the money to pay for it. But if you do not have the right of kinship, you cannot make decisions. Now, this information is done every 2 years. The state of New Jersey Funeral Directors Association, they poll every funeral home in the state. So this is the combined average of 21 counties in the state of New Jersey, which was done in 2019. These numbers will come out again in 2021 because people want to know how much does a funeral cost. It really depends on what region you're in and what your selections are. We're protected because every funeral home has to follow FTC rulings, meaning that we are not allowed to sell you anything that you don't need. We're not allowed to offer it to you. Let's say if you're having a cremation, we can't say, well, you have to purchase a casket first. If you did not have an arrangement that requires you to have a casket, we're not supposed to offer that to you. We're not allowed to take advantage of people, and the consumer has the rights. It's the Federal Trade Commission. Make sure that the consumers have the rights because they state that you're in a fragile time and we should not take advantage of you. Also, we must provide a general price list before any prices are ever suggested or discussed. When you enter a funeral home and you start discussing pricing and arrangements, they're supposed to give you a general price list, one to take with you because you should have the right to review it when you're not under those circumstances. A general price list has to have anything that you could ever charge. That's why if you ever made arrangements, when we quote prices, we don't use all of the spaces on there because we can't make up prices. We can't say, well, because you came with insurance, because you came on Medicaid, because you didn't have $1, that I'm gonna charge you this much and I'm gonna charge. No, before you get there, all of the prices are in categories. And in the categories, it'll tell you exactly what it will cost, all the way down to if you're using one of the vehicles, it has to say, if it goes over 15 miles, it'll be this much. Other than that, we can't charge. On the general price list, it'll say storage fees will be $50 per day after. Whatever a funeral home decides, a business decision to charge something, it must be on a general price list. And it's there to protect the consumers. Now, funeral homes can go afterwards and give you a discount if they decide, but they have to charge everyone the same thing. That's why if you made arrangements, and you'll see it, if we're ever audited, whatever is on our price list, on a price list that agrees with that date, has to have the exact same number, or else it's FTC violation, because then you are changing your prices based on what consumer comes in. Now, I left that slide up a while for everybody to have an opportunity to look at it. It's just basically the prices that can be in the state of New Jersey starting from 2019. It changes from region to region. Next, how do you fund a funeral? You can fund a funeral with cash, certified check, credit card, or GoFundMe. If you have a loved one and they have a whole lot of money in the bank, it's best for you to get that money out before they die, because it's illegal to withdraw money from an account of someone who is dead. That money becomes their estate once the bank determines they are dead. How does the bank determine they're dead? When we file that death certificate. Right now, because we use EDRS, again, like I said previously, when you leave the funeral arrangement, we put the information in the system. Once that Social Security number hits the system, the alert is out there. In terms of Social Security, you don't have to fill out the Social Security forms to say that they died, because once we put in the system, Social Security is informed. So it's that's the thing that starts the clock of, oh, this person is really dead. Okay. In terms of GoFundMe, if someone goes on GoFundMe, we cannot pull, funeral homes do not pull money out of GoFundMe. You have to have somebody who is a part of the family or somebody who you designate to collect the GoFundMe money, and then they take the GoFundMe money and bring it to the funeral home. If you want, you can go to banks now and you can put in your bank account a POD, which is payable on death. And it's paperwork that's done with the bank. And you go and basically you assign a beneficiary at the bank. So if I have a bank account and I want Timothy to have the money without going through probate, without going through the courts, I would just fill out forms, he would sign it, and it would always be there. So if that's the case, then when I die, all he would need would be a death certificate to go there, and then he would have privy to all the money that's in the bank. If not, again, then it would have to go through probate.
There's another question in the chat. This is regarding the account. What if it's a joint account? Do they freeze it if one party dies?
If you have a joint account, you don't have a POD on it, you can pull out half.
May I jump in on this?
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking up some information on this because I was considering it. You might want to talk to an attorney before you set something up like that, because from what I read, you can only have one beneficiary. You can't have an alternate. So you might want to explore that more before you make a decision.
Now, in terms of what's stated, exploring it more before you make a decision, if you know you're going to need their money to pay for something, then a POD is good. You just have to make sure that if something happens, you go to the bank and you change the beneficiary. And they never said, it's not like state employees where once you state it, then you have problems, difficulties changing it. You can go to the bank and you can update it, because other than that, you have to wait until probate in order to receive your money. Any other questions?
Yes, there's another one in the chat. If you make pre-arrangement, do the price change if you die 10 years later?
Well, if you make pre-arrangements 20 years ago, policies were pre-arrangement policies were guaranteed. They don't do any more guaranteed funeral arrangement policies. But what they assume, and when you make a pre-arrangement, they cannot put down the cost of the funeral. They can't put the price of the funeral down. I apologize, the cemetery down, because cemeteries don't stay with inflation. But most prices stay within inflation, except for the cemetery. But if you do have a guaranteed arrangement, do not go to the funeral home and make any changes. Because once you make changes, then you will have a different contract and no longer will the prices be guaranteed. But they stopped that practice a while ago.
May I jump in again? Listen, everyone, we just want to just reiterate that this is strictly about pre-death planning. There's a question about probate, and that was addressed in the last series. So if you can just hold your thought, we'll eventually put it up online.
And there was one more question, Deaconess Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
What if the person you assign passes before you? Should you utilize the funeral home to be the funeral agent? This was in regards, I believe, to someone that you assign to represent you in your decisions.
Yes, you can select someone else, but the form has where you put two people down. So if the first person dies, it drops to the second person. But it's like anything else, the will, anything else, the last document is what they use. So you can go and just select someone else. This is funeral home assignable policies. And this is where you have insurance and you can assign the insurance to the funeral home. It's good for both pre-need, and it's also good at the time of death. And I just want everybody to understand what an assignment is. An assignment is you would have forms that you would fill out, and you would sign. By signing, the beneficiary it would to the insurance policy. If you die and if you have insurance, some insurance policies take 9 weeks to process. So you cannot have a funeral until after they know how the funeral is going to be paid. So funeral homes now, they use agencies that will take on the responsibility once it's assignable. So if we will contact the insurance company and we ask the insurance company, is this policy assignable? If the insurance company says yes, it's assignable, then the family would sign. The beneficiaries on the policy would sign. And basically they were saying, yes, pay the funeral home up to this price. And you have to list the price of the funeral. Once that's done, then we can go and offer it and find out if the insurance policy is verifiable. Because if insurance is under 2 years, is in the contestable state, and they will not pay for a funeral. Insurance companies will only talk to beneficiaries. Very rarely will they talk to a funeral director. You have to have the beneficiary there. And when the beneficiary is there, the only thing they'll say is, yes, you are the beneficiary. Will this insurance policy cover $12,000? They'll say, yes, the policy will cover $12,000, or no, the policy won't cover. They give you 3 choices. No, it won't cover 12,000. Well, will it cover 10,000? No, it won't cover 10,000. It's like, okay, well, where do I go? Well, will it cover 5,000? They said, yes, the policy will cover $5,000. Then once it's assignable, then we send it to our funding agency, and then they're able to send paperwork in with the exact numbers. And then the agency guarantees, the funding agency guarantees that payment will be. And if that's the case, then within 3 days, we won't be paid, but you could go ahead and set a date for the funeral. You're not signing over the whole policy. You're only signing the portion that's used for the funeral. And after that portion, the rest is given back to the beneficiary. So if it's a $20,000 policy and the funeral is only worth, make math easy, $12,000, the beneficiaries will get the $8,000 back. But the money that you receive back is split amongst all the beneficiaries. As a beneficiary, you can say, no, I don't want to spend that on, I don't want to do it. I want to keep my money. And you have that right. That's a family issue. But again, if you have two beneficiaries and one person says, no, I don't want to spend it. He never did anything for me. Like, look, he's just my father. I'm not signing anything. Then we only have access to that 50% that goes to the one beneficiary. Because you are not, just because you're a beneficiary on a life insurance policy does not mean that you have to use it toward a funeral. Then we go and we can discuss the other part of assignment. If you're coming and you want to make a pre-need arrangement and you make all your selections, and then you also decide to select a funeral agent, but you didn't allot any finances, it is not the funeral agent's responsibility to pay for your funeral. Even though they may be the one carrying out your desires, they're not allowed to do it. Sometimes you'll have family that'll say, they picked that person to be a funeral agent, let them pay for it. And even if it's not hostile like that, it's other steps that you can do. You can go and you can assign your funeral policy to a funeral home. You make the funeral home the beneficiary, or the state of New Jersey treasurer, the beneficiary, depends on where the money has to go. If you have to spend down to go on Medicaid, then it has to be that the state of New Jersey treasurer, because the family's not allowed to receive any money back if you're on Medicaid. But it's the same way with any other assignment, any money that's left over, it goes to who the beneficiaries are. So this way, let's say person W, they're sickly and they have a policy and they have a funeral agent, and you don't want to have to look for the policy at the end of life, you can go and assign it to a funeral home. Signing it to a funeral home does not mean you have to use that funeral home. Everything is transferable at death or before death. You can change it. It's paperwork. All funeral homes, when we have it, we have to have the same paperwork to transfer it. And we can transfer it to another funeral home, or we can transfer it back to the insurance company. Okay. Another thing about insurance, be careful. A lot of insurance companies will tell you, oh, we'll pay. As soon as you open this policy, we'll pay. And then you'll get there and they said, no, we have to review it. It can take, again, up to 9 weeks to review, because what they want to do is make sure, especially because it's in the contestable state. In the contestable state, they have to make sure that when you took out that policy, you did not know you had cancer if you died from cancer. So it just takes a longer process. So what they'll tell us is we can pay you a portion of what you paid on a policy. So that happens a lot. If you have a policy and you realize your 10,000 policy isn't enough, so you're going to go and make a change and you're going to update it. And you update it, is that 2-year period starts with the new form. Doesn't go back to I had this for 10 years. You have to be real specific when you talk to the insurance companies. I am not an insurance producer, so I don't know what their rulings are, but I can just tell you these are some of the things that we saw, and it's become a problem because people were misled. So that's just a few things. Has to be 2 years old, out of the contestable state. If you're going to make any changes, then you need to get it in writing. Get it in writing that I'm increasing the policy, but it won't affect my start date. Once you get that in writing, then you can challenge anything that they say. And also you can assignments. When you make assignments to a funeral home, you are still the beneficiary. That is still your money. It's just this way it can be paid without going through all of the extra red tape. Next. We're having technical.
I am. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Give
that's
me
all
a
right.
moment.
We see the mouse moving. We're gonna go into, when she gets there, we're gonna go into beneficiaries. And we talk about the importance of beneficiaries. And it was brought up earlier. Well, what happens if you the person dies and you didn't do the paperwork? That's the issue. But we're going to start with, then we're just going to go straight down to concerns. If a beneficiary is a minor, you see a lot of this with job employer insurance. They'll list their children down. We cannot touch their money until they become 18. So therefore, you cannot use it for that funeral if they're just 10 years old. So it's like saying that he had no life insurance for the funeral. Can't touch it. If you have no degree of kinship or a lesser degree of kinship, then that's where it also becomes an issue. And what I'm saying in that is, let's say the wife, the wife is doing the arrangements, and he selected somebody, a sister. The sister's a beneficiary. The wife cannot tell the sister what to do with the money. Once you are a beneficiary, it's your choice if you pay for a funeral or not. But just because you have the money doesn't give you the decision to change the arrangements. I have all this money set up and I should have a say. Yeah, you have a say to sign that funeral over to the funeral home for it can be paid. And that becomes a family matter. But no, just because you have the money to pay for the funeral, you do not have the right to control the funeral. If beneficiary is not in agreement, one can take their money and say, I'm not using it. The other one can say, well, I'm going to use it. Well, that funeral costs too much. You get to say how much of your money you want to spend or how much you want to keep. Big one. Beneficiary died, deceased. It goes to their children. But then you have to prove. You have to get that person's death certificate. And then that's a process. So it just adds time on. That person's deceased. If the name is incorrect, we'll see names that are incorrect because when they put you down as a beneficiary, your last name was Dog. And since then, you got a divorce and now you married a cat. Well, when it comes, you have to go and prove where your name came from. So you have to provide your marriage license or your divorce papers. Because as far as they're concerned, the names don't add up. You have to go and you have to prove who you were at that time and how did you get there now. If you don't assign a beneficiary, then it has to go to probate and it becomes a part of their estate. If the beneficiary cannot be located, then they can't sign. That money stays with the insurance company until that person is located or until the estate works it out. And if you have insurance that is not fundable and not assignable, then the family has to wait until the insurance company pays. And again, it can be, sometimes it's families will pay out of pocket and they'll keep calling. Well, did you hear anything from the insurance company? And we just, it's not funny, but we laugh because we know it's going to be 3 months. But some are not, they're not assignable, they're not fundable, they go directly. And then you have other insurance policies that when you're sitting there, if you get them the information, they say, email me the death certificate, the check is cut. So it really depends on what the insurance company is and what insurance you have. So it's good to talk to them. Uh-oh, I got 10 minutes. Next. Okay, this is a rough one. Public employees. For public employees, it is not like a beneficiary. The only one who can decide where public employees' funds go are the public employee. So therefore, you have to designate what you want done while you are alive. Other insurances, the beneficiaries get to sign and say, yes, I'm going to receive the funding. When it comes to a public employee, only the public employee can go through their system to designate this is where I want the money to go. Sharice, they even have a place on there for you to send it to your organization. You can send it to a funeral home. You can send it where you want it to go. But you have to decide how you want to send it. Luckily, the Funeral Directors Association, we're working with government in order to get a form to change some of these things that they can be assignable. But haven't gotten any response back yet. So, but for now, it's something. And when I say public employees, I'm talking to all the school teachers. I'm talking to people who work for the state of New Jersey. You're a public employee. And only you can designate how you want your money forwarded. Okay. Next. This is where we talk about funeral trusts and funeral trust funds. A funeral trust fund, one of the biggest ones for New Jersey is choices. There are just a few rules with choices. With choices, a funeral trust fund is where you pay money into it and they hold on to your money. And then at the end of it, you have that money to pay for a funeral. Okay? I'll use choices as an example because it's in New Jersey. Funeral homes are not allowed to commingle funds, meaning that when you put your money to go into a trust fund, it cannot go into a funeral home account. The two have to be totally separate. When you do the trust fund, you also will receive a statement every month to let you see where your interest is because you accrue interest every month. And that's why with funeral trusts, where they say, well, the difference between guaranteed and non-guaranteed, with a funeral trust, you can see where it keeps up with the inflation of the cost of a funeral. Not the cost of a burial, but the cost of a funeral. And once you put it in there, you also can, it's transferable, meaning that you can go to any other funeral home. It's forms. You fill out a form and the money goes to a different funeral home. You can borrow off of it. And you can also borrow off of your insurance policies. So you need to talk to your family or whatever in pre-planning. If you borrow money off of it, when it comes to the time that you need it, the money's not going to be there. But with funeral home trust funds, we deposit the funds again right to it, and it's called a prepaid agreement. One is revocable. And revocable just means that anytime you can take your money out, you can change your mind. At the end of it, any difference goes back to the family because you put down beneficiaries there too. The only thing about that I would say, you have an option to have the purchaser or the alternate to put down because you're supposed to pay taxes. Always go with the person who makes the least amount of money because you'll get a statement for taxes at the end of the year. It's not big, but you still get a statement because they count that as your asset. Next. This is a trust fund, but it's called the irrevocable, and they have it in the state of New Jersey. And irrevocable, you have to be going on Medicaid or some type of public assistance within 3 months to get on an irrevocable assignment. An irrevocable assignment is the same exact thing. If you have to spend down to get on Medicaid and you have insurance, nursing homes will tell you to cash in the insurance policy. You do not have to do that. You can make an assignment. You can assign it. And then when you assign it, New Jersey State Treasury Department will be the beneficiary, just to make sure that you can't put it there, get on Medicaid, and take your money back. So it's like it's help for that purpose. When it comes to spending down your assets, they go back 5 years, and you can only have $2,000 worth of assets. But in spending it down, you can apply it toward a funeral. You can go and purchase a grave. There's a lot of things you can do with it. But once you do that, the money's not refundable. You won't get the money back, but the money can be applied to a funeral. In terms of why is this a great idea? One, you can get on Medicaid, and sometimes getting on Medicaid is just because you have to go into a nursing home. It's not that you were poor, but you have to go into the nursing home and you need these extra funds. Now, why it's interesting that they have this and you can use this is that then you don't have to have a Medicaid burial. Some people don't go on Medicaid or public assistance until they're in their senior years, but they lived a very good life and they don't want a Medicaid burial. But if you do have to have a Medicaid burial, that's where the numbers are. The funeral cannot cost over $4,340. Family can only pay out of pocket $1,570. The government contributes $2,246. So you saw the previous slides that showed you what a funeral costs. So this means that either you will have to be buried in a non-title grave or you will have to be cremated in order to fit. But again, once we had COVID, the graves have been flooded. So before you used to go to East Ridge Lawn and be in a nice grave. Those graves are gone. You go to St. Peter's and be in a non-title section. Those graves are gone. We are now using Hillside. And those are just some concerns about prearranging. A, that you would have your paperwork lined up, that the family members would know where your paperwork is held, and that you would review it and make the necessary adjustments, that you would decide if you needed a funeral agent, knowing that that mechanism is there for you. Contact your insurance company, find out if it is assignable, if it's not assignable. If you can, go and purchase a grave. If you know where you would like to be buried, that's the thing, to go and purchase a grave. Because if you purchase it now, it'll be cheaper than 20 years from now when you die. That's why funeral homes hardly never sell people single graves, because there'll always be somebody else that can go in that land.
Thank you, Deaconess Eleanor Rudolph. We really appreciate the presentation that you gave this evening. I'm sure that people will have additional questions later on, but this was a nice overview. And we just wanted to acknowledge our pastor, Reverend Joel David Rudolph, who allowed us to do this. We're really excited about the series. If there's nothing else, we're going to end this session, and we hope to do something of this nature in the future. God bless you, and may He keep you. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night, all.